So let's go ahead and get started today. How's everyone doing? I'm Brian Bernfeld, the Chief Flight Instructor from Palomar Aviation. I'm with Aiden, a TCI from Palomar Aviation, and today we're going to bring you a really good presentation on what to expect on your FAA Check Ride. So as we all know, when you are going through a Part 61 program, you have to take a check ride with a designated pilot examiner to obtain your license at the end of your training. And over the years, check rides have changed from an older system of judging the pilots to a newer system called the Airman Certification Standards, and we're going to touch on what that means today. So just as always, this is not considered formal instruction. We just want to start a discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at Palomar Aviation through our website, palomaraviation.com, and your local CSIP, wherever you are, you can find it on the Cirrus Locator app. So I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation started. So when you're taking your FAA check ride, we just want to tell you what to expect. And Nick was originally supposed to give this presentation, but he is with one of our students right now flying an SR-22 Turbo, so he's having a lot more fun than us right now. But we'll let him get a pass on that one, and we'll cover this for him today. But he did a really good job on this presentation, so I just wanted to say thanks to him as well for putting in the work on this. So the objective today is to understand the expectations of the FAA check ride and how to prepare for the ride appropriately. There's multiple parts of the check ride that have completion standards. There's the Airman Certification Standards and the Practical Test Standards, and we're going to talk about the difference between those two. We're also going to touch on how the Cirrus Transition sets you up for the FAA check ride, and check ride taking strategy, tips to have and to use in order to pass your check ride and make yourself a little bit more comfortable taking it, and we're going to give you some tips for your check ride as well. So, as I stated before, there's multiple parts of your check ride. There's an oral portion, a flight portion, and a written portion that you take prior to the check ride. Everyone knows that is the written test. It's the 60-question multiple choice test that you have to take. Pass it with the 70%, and you have to go over the questions you got wrong with your flight instructor to obtain an endorsement in order to go and take the practical test, which is the oral and the flight portion of the test. The oral portion goes first. You have to pass the oral in order to get to the flight portion. The flight portion consists of a variety of maneuvers laid out in the either ACS or PTS, and throughout any portion of the flight, if for some reason you need to stop the test, either the oral or the flight, you can tell the DP, I want to discontinue it, so you can stop the test for any reason. Either of the two people participating, the DP or the pilot, can stop the test at any time. The DP can issue a notice of, basically you can not pass your check ride, the DP has to tell you right away in the oral or the flight portion. So touching on that, the outcomes of the check ride is a successful completion, an unsatisfactory level of disapproval, or a letter of a discontinuance. So the completion standards for your check ride. The FAA uses the Airman Certification Standards as the measure of completions for check rides. The private pilot, instrument rating, commercial pilot, and ATP check rides are all ACS standards. The CFI is still PTS standards, which we'll touch on in a moment. Inside contains a section required for knowledge that is tested by means of an oral examination as well as a flight portion. So the two sections cover what you're going to go over in your oral portion, where the DP has to ask you questions from those sections, and there's a flight portion where you're going to have to do those maneuvers like I talked about before. The flight portion has standards that are clearly defined, such as plus or minus 10 knots on maneuver, plus or minus 100 feet on steep turns, so on and so forth. You're going to find everything in the Airman Certification Standards for the check ride that you're taking. So as you can see, there's the private pilot, single engine airplane land practical test standards, and the ACS standards. We have moved from the PTS to the ACS over the last couple of years, and the ACS is what we are currently using to test private pilots. So the Cirrus Transition and how it relates to your FAA check ride. It gives you a crash course video series on the variety of different things pertaining to your airplane, such as systems, emergency procedures, normal procedures, and standard instructions for maneuvers such as the IFOM. This is huge because this is all information that other airplane manufacturers might not provide for your airplane, and it gives you an extra learning tool that you can apply towards your studying for your FAA check ride. There are going to be questions on systems. There's going to be a section on emergency procedures, normal procedures, and you're going to need to be able to do all the maneuvers per ACS standards. So having it clearly laid out in the IFOM really enables you to take your training above and beyond what a normal course without the Cirrus Transition would enable you to do. So the emergency procedures, when you're doing it on your check ride, it has to be for your airplane and per your airplane standards. So for Cirrus, since you are either supposed to go to an airport or use CAPS in an emergency situation, if you do an off-field landing simulation on your check ride, you can possibly fail your check ride because you did not perform to your airplane's specifications and how the procedures operate. And that's where the Cirrus Transition enables you to become better, because it shows you exactly what that airplane is doing from Cirrus in these very high quality videos and study materials that they produce. So the check ride strategy. Everyone always talks about don't talk yourself down a rabbit hole. Answer only what you're asked. If they ask you a question on the system, such as an alternator, answer the question only about the alternator. Don't offer up information that wasn't asked about. Even if you do not know the answer, you're allowed to look it up in FAA approved material. That FAA, you're allowed to look up all the statutes for the required equipment if you don't know it off the top of your head. You need to know where to look in this material in order to quickly find it, because that DP will know if you're just searching for it if you don't exactly know where it is. And having something like an electronic flight bag with ForeFlight where you can just search is actually an incredibly useful tool to use on your check ride, because it saves you time if you know exactly what number to go to. Required equipment, 91205, you type it in, you're right there. And once again, don't share information that's more than necessary, especially discussing topics that you might not be 100% familiar with. So don't talk yourself down the rabbit hole. If you don't know the answer to it, just say you don't know. If you know where to find it, go and find it in the FAA approved material. But if you don't know something and you don't know where to find it, it's better than offering up something that you're making up on the spot or guessing at it, because if you don't know it and you just don't know it and you say that you don't know it, you're going to have respect from the DP. So those are some useful check ride taking tips. So to prepare for your check ride, you have to go through all the required training, solo, cross-country training. You need to pass your written test with a 70, and you need to earn all your endorsements from your flight instructor. So you need to fly with your local TCI or CSIP frequently to remain proficient for at least 1 month leading up to your check ride. You need to tab up spots in the POH that you may need a reference. So where the systems are, you want to go and put tabs on the electrical system, on the fuel system, on the climate system, the brake system, everything that you would be possibly asked on your check ride so you can quickly find it. Tab up the FARAIM on where you want to reference materials, such as the required equipment, the oxygen requirements, the medical requirements, stuff like that. So if you have it tabbed on an actual book, or if you have it tabbed or you know where to find it in your electronic flight bag, that's going to be useful in your oral exam, because you're going to be able to save time and look more prepared. And then utilize references such as the Airplane Flying Handbook and Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge to your advantage. That's where all your material for your CFI course is going to come from. So knowing that as a private pilot or instrument pilot is going to put you far ahead of other pilots who don't use those materials, because it's from the FAA, written by pilots. Those are the best references you have for general flying, and then the Cirrus Transition is the best reference you have for the Cirrus aircraft. So I'm going to open it up to any questions or comments that experiences people may have had on their check rides before. I'm going to bring in Aiden and have him answer any questions, any scenarios that you might have. But Aiden, let's talk about something that you might possibly be asked in an oral exam in terms of a systems question, something that you may have been asked before in relation to, a private pilot's check ride or an instrument check ride.
Typically, one of the biggest systems related questions is going to be probably the fuel system. The examiner is most likely going to ask you, can you draw out the schematic of the fuel system, which can be located, like Brian said, in the POH. They'll have you draw it out and then ask you some questions based pretty much very basic, such as how much fuel total, how much usable, and then any sort of abnormal procedures that could kind of come about with the fuel system, such as fuel starvation from leading one tank dry forgetting to switch your fuel selector and stuff like that. And all those questions, like Brian was saying before, should be answered at the utmost level of simplicity so that you aren't digging yourself a hole, essentially, to where the examiner finds out, okay, well, he or she's starting to talk about something that it's starting to sound like might be a little bit rough. And the next thing you know, you've dug yourself into a hole you can't get out of.
Right. And if you just answer exactly what you're asked and they have follow-up questions, they will ask the follow-up questions because it's the DP's job to find where your knowledge ends and see where you have to start looking things up, or just where your knowledge ends and you don't even know where else to look to find more information. So they're going to ask you follow-up questions, but if you offer a question, information like as an answer that's wrong, they might actually ask you a question based off that wrong answer and lead you down a rabbit hole. And if you just keep answering stuff and you're making stuff up, it's a telltale sign that you don't understand the information that you're being asked. So that's something important. You just want to answer what you're asked, let them ask the follow-up question, and then answer those questions. And if you don't know something, look it up.
And then typically a lot of DPs will give you some sort of hint as to, okay, you might have given me the wrong answer. They might give you a, are you sure? Or they'll kind of raise an eyebrow and say, really? So they'll give you some sort of indication that, okay, that probably wasn't the answer they were looking for. And they give you a chance to say to them, okay, well, I might not know the answer, but I know where to find it.
Right. And DPs don't want to fail pilots. They are there to help you get your pilot's license. And a good DP is going to have the mindset is you've passed the check ride until you've done something where I have to fail you. It's not that you're working to pass the check ride at the end. They're going in with the mindset that you're proficient because you've earned the endorsements from your instructor that says, my student is prepared for this check ride. We've done the 3 hours of preparation the preceding 60 days. We've done all the required training. He's proficient, he's safe, he's ready to go. So having that mindset of I answer what I'm asked, I answer the follow-up questions, and I come in prepared with where I need to look stuff up is going to go a long way with the DP in your oral exam. And, you know, as you go deeper into your flight training, these oral exams do get harder, and there's more information on them. So, you know, Aiden and I have both gone from private pilot all the way to flight instructor, which is 6 or 7 check rides, depending on if you add stuff onto it. So, Aiden, I just want to touch on how you prepared for your check rides, for the oral exams, and what was your mindset coming into the end of your training after you completed your, you're just getting into check ride prep. What was your mindset?
Typically towards the end of my training, I would try and find other people that I knew that were kind of in the same boat as me. They were either close to or had just completed the check ride that I was about to take. Go find a person like that, and you can pick their brain. And if they even took the check ride with the same DP that you have your check ride scheduled with, that's even better, because they can offer up some extremely important information about what kind of stuff this specific DP is going to be asking about. And then as far as preparing for the check ride, like Brian said, the 3 hours within the 2 calendar months to make sure that you're proficient. And then also mentioned in the presentation, consistently flying with an instructor or CSIP or TCI to make sure that you're being as proficient as you possibly could be for the check ride, and keeping keeping yourself accountable for some sort of check ride standards, such as on your seat turns, making sure there's someone that can keep you accountable for that plus or minus 100 feet. That can be very difficult for some people to stay within. And then say, as far as within a couple days of the check ride, I typically tried not to fly the day before, just to let my mind and body rest before having to wake up early the next day and have everything ready for the examiner when he showed up. Most of my check rides were done with an examiner here that likes to, he says you start at 7, but he'll be there at 6 o'clock. And if you're ready at 6 o'clock, he'll start at 6. So I always tried to beat the DP to the airport, have every sort of document that he would ask of me ready to present, such as my endorsements, my logbook, licenses, medicals, photo ID, and so on. Make sure that that's all ready and and my written test as well. Make sure that that's all ready and accessible for the DPE. And that's pretty much as far as preparation. And then to make sure that I felt ready for the oral, same thing, just meeting up with someone with the same DPE or same check ride can ask you questions the way that an examiner would, or ASA makes a really good book that has a lot of example questions that could be asked of you on, say, whatever check ride you're taking. Say private pilot's a blue book that says private pilot oral guide, and it was just an extremely useful tool to help me kind of figure out this is the type of question that's going to be asked, and then this is kind of what the answer they're looking for.
Right. And, everyone has a different way of preparing for their check ride. Me personally, I made flashcards for all the information out of the POH, for all the systems, all the V speeds, everything that I thought was important for the airplane. I made flashcards. I have a shoebox full of flashcards, and I wear size 14 shoes, and it's a big shoebox, and it's completely full to the brim, from private pilot all the way through CFII and even the CSIP course. So everyone has their own way of training. I had a student who wrote on a whiteboard every acronym known to mankind in aviation, and it was his way of just remembering that information, because that's how some people remember the information you're going to be asked on your oral portion of your check ride. So something that Aiden touched on is, he tries to limit his flying a couple days before the check ride. I recommend for students to do the same thing, because the more you fly, if you have a bad flight the day before your check ride, it's a mindset that you might go in with a little bit more of a negative feeling, because you didn't have a good flight right before your check ride. So, it's all muscle memory too. So the more you rest, the more ready your muscles are to perform with the maneuvers you need to do. So when you're getting ready for your check ride, also getting a good presentation for the DP is important. When you're printing off your cross-country flight plan, put it in, on like a do-a-tang type folder. Print it off if you're using ForeFlight. Print off all the information you need. Print off everything, all the weather, NOTAMs, any pieces of airport information, diagrams, and put it in an organized folder to present to the DP for your check ride. And that goes a long way. Dress professionally. What you want to make sure that, like Aiden said, that you're early to the airport. I had a DP as well who liked to start really early. He said 7:30 in the morning. I was at the airport at 6:30 in the morning. He got there 10 minutes after I did, and we were in the air by 7 a.m. I'm sorry, 7 a.m. for the recheck, for the discontinuance ahead of my CFI ride. So, every DP is different, but they do have a set of rules to follow, which is the ACS standards. But you want to present yourself as a professional person on these check rides. So come prepared, print things off, have exactly what they're looking for, all your documents in order when you're getting ready to take your check ride, and then make sure your logbook is tabbed for all the times that you need. And you should be doing all of this with your instructor before your check ride. When my students go on their check rides, we sit down a couple days before, we tab their logbook, we do their IACRA, we make sure their endorsements are perfect, we make sure everything is ready days before, so if there is something that we catch, we have time to fix it. I have a friend who had a student who needed 0.5 hours of solo cross-country time. They found out the night before the guy's check ride. The guy shows up to the airport at 5 a.m. to do a cross-country the day of his check ride, does the flight, comes back, ties the airplane down 10 minutes before the DPE shows up, and goes right into a private pilot check ride, passes it, and goes home like 12 hours later. That is unacceptable for any circumstance, no matter what happens. If you're a professional flight instructor, your student should not be going through that length to qualify for their check ride. It should have been something that is taken care of days and weeks beforehand. So that's something that you're looking for coming up to your check ride. So Aiden, I just want to touch on what the day of your check ride, how did you prepare yourself? If you took it like not at 6 a.m., like in the afternoon, what did you do in the mornings before your check rides, and how did you occupy your time? What time did you get to the airport? Stuff like that.
Typically for all the check rides that I took, they all ended up being in the morning. So, but for like a check ride in the afternoon, recommend get to the airport maybe an hour or so before the start time, just so that you can mentally prepare, make sure that your airplane is ready to go. For example, fuel, oil, just double check all that stuff to make sure that it's at an appropriate level for the check ride, so that you're not having to scramble to get a top off or put oil in the airplane while the DP is standing there kind of frowning at you while you're doing that. So get to the airport about an hour early, make sure you find some sort of room. For example, I'm sure down here at Palomar, Carlsbad Jet Center would be more than happy to let us use their conference room for a check ride. So you can go into the Jet Center, get the room set up, and put all your required documents on the table, get everything out ready for that. Then head out to the airplane, maybe get the maintenance book, double check oil, fuel, just do a quick pre-flight around the airplane to see if there's anything wrong that you could potentially get fixed while you're in the oral portion of the check ride, so that it's ready to go when you come back out. And then after that, just kind of take a seat, relax, and wait for the DP. Occasionally the DP has, if you're in the afternoon, typically the DP will have some sort of check ride before you, and depending on how that check ride before you goes, they might be ready to start a little bit earlier than what you have scheduled.
Right. And as Aiden said, the day of your check ride, you want to make sure you have everything in order, and you should have your CFI help you set everything up. It shouldn't be on the student solely to find the place that you're going to be doing your oral exam in. It should be something that if you're doing it through a school, has been set up through the school, or if you're doing it through an independent CFI, they have a predetermined location that they have access to. You want to make sure you have everything set up orderly, and you want to have your documents set ready. They're going to verify your documents either on a laptop or a school's computer or something like that. So you want to make sure you have all that out, prepared, everything is good to go, everything matches. And then if you, as you continue throughout the day, you want to make sure that you just continue to show that you're prepared and act professionally through your check ride. And as you get to the flight portion, as Ethan said, make sure it's all done beforehand. You're going to be tested on your pre-flight inspection, but you should be doing two pre-flight inspections on the day of your check ride. One well before the DP gets there, and then one with the DP so they can assess what you know on the pre-flight inspection. And that's something that you are tested on per the ACS. So the last bit of advice that I have for everybody, and we touched on it in the presentation, is the ACS. Every DP you talk to, the one thing they're going to all say all the time is that they wish the students read the ACS more before the check ride. The ACS is free on the FAA's website. You can Google private pilot ACS, commercial ACS, instrument ACS, any of those, and it's going to give you a free PDF. You can download it to your tablet. You can do anything you want with it, and you can go through it and you can read. And the thing about it is it goes section by section by section. It's going to go for the oral exam. It's going to give you the areas of knowledge that you need to know. And it's going to give you completion standards, and then it's going to give you any sort of risk mitigation stuff that the FAA wants you to know about for the flight maneuvers. But if you read the ACS before your check ride, you will be very, very, very prepared for the check ride, and you're going to know exactly where you're going to be asked, because that's where the examiner is going to get that information from. So if there's one thing that every DP has told me throughout the entire time I've been flight instructing, is that they wished the students read the ACS more before the check ride, and that they wish that the CFIs understood it better. So that is something that we really push at Palomar Aviation, is doing the Cirrus Transition, because it helps you understand the ACS maneuvers, and then understanding the ACS, because if you understand the ACS, you're going to be more prepared for your check ride. So I just wanted to thank Aiden for his input today on what to expect for your check ride. I also wanted to thank Nick for making the presentation. I wish he could have been here with us today. If anyone has any questions, we have about 3 minutes left before the end of our presentation. We're more than happy to help you out. Mike, I know you're doing your private pilot's license, so I hope that this information was good to kind of give you expectations on what to expect for your check ride.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hey, so you mentioned some manuals or books to bring, more materials to bring to the oral exam. Can you run through that list again? I was trying to write down. I got the pilot's handbook of aeronautic knowledge.
Right, so it's the
knowledge. Yep.
Yeah, so it's the airplane flying handbook.
Okay.
It's free through the FAA. You can Google that as well. It's an FAA PDF. The code for the FAA, it's FAA 80833B. But if you just search airplane flying handbook, you'll find that on the internet. And then
Okay.
the PHAC, which is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, is another really good, useful tool from the FAA. Similar deal. You just Google it. It'll be free on the FAA. I don't know that one's code. It's 8083 something. And then if you want the hard books, like the actual paperback copies, Amazon has them for $20 maybe. They're available on ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, any of those electronic flight bags. So when I did my CFI course, I read those books about 7 times through. I wish I had read them as a private pilot because I wouldn't have done so much studying as a CFI.
Yeah, and then also, Mike, so Brian said the PHAC, the Airplane Flying Handbook, and then also if either a paper or electronic copy of the FAR AIM, and then the ACS, and that's all I can think of in addition to those two.
Okay.
Yeah, so the FAR AIM is really important to know. I personally recommend that you get a digital copy of that, just because it's a lot easier to get through it. And then if you really want to get into some light reading, the Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators is another FAA publication that's really good, but that one is a long read. But if you really want to understand what the airplane's doing while you're flying, that one taught me a lot a little bit later on in my flight training. But
And is
those are
FAR AIM just another one that I Googled to find?
Yeah,
yeah,
if you go,
that one.
yeah, if you go in the App Store and just type in FAR AIM, it should come up with an app. Or if you wanted to get the paper copy, it's probably on Amazon.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Rick knows I have a really good joke about the FAR AIM that he's going to want to say right now.
If Brian's ever elected to Congress, I think you'll use that when you're taking it.
So, cool. Yeah, so I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope that you got as much out of it. Go ahead, Rick.
One more quick question. Is there a duration from when you take the written to when you have to take the check ride? Does that have to be done in a certain amount of time when you pass the written?
So your written test is, if you take it to qualify for your check ride, you have 2 years after you take it to take the check ride. Normally, if you go and you do all the work required to take a written test, there's not many people who take the 2 years to get their check ride. But if you do take it, it's good for 2 years. A lot of people use that to their advantage for their instrument rating. If they want to become a CFII, they take both tests at the same time. But it's good for 2 years. But the information does change over time. You know, now they have the ICAO flight plans instead of the FAA flight plans, and that changed within the last 2 years. So there is sometimes different information that you're still going to have to learn. So you want to keep that in mind. If you take your written test and do the work to get the endorsement, you should definitely try to get your check ride done within a timely fashion.
Thank you.
Cool. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. If you have any questions, you can always message us via email. We have our information on palomaraviation.com. These are being recorded and posted to our website for viewing after the fact. Rick's been doing a really good job updating our website, so we want to thank him for that. And then, as always, we can help you out if you have your flight instruction. We do sessions through webcam, Zoom, FaceTime, anything you want. We'd love to help you out with your Cirrus flight training if you're in the San Diego area or even anywhere else you want to come hang out with us. I just want to thank everyone for their time, and we'll see you on Tuesday.